Worse Than a Paycheck, Finding Meaning, Money, and Happiness in the Second Half of Life is the latest book from Chris Farrell, who is considered a leading expert on the trend toward working longer in the second half of life. Thank you for joining me, Chris. I really appreciate this.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
I have a little bit more on your background for my audience. You are a columnist for Next Avenue. That's the online magazine for grown-ups, right?
Yep.
You write for the Minneapolis Star Tribune, Forbes, Bloomberg Business Week, the New York Times, Kiplinger's, and you speak across the country on the topic of unretirement. You're a busy guy.
Very. I enjoy it.
Well,
I enjoy what I'm doing.
So tonight we are both living your passion at any age, and especially on the topic of purpose and a paycheck, underlying paycheck, because it seems like, that's a little hard in coming.
Yes, but it's also important because so many people, they don't have a lot in retirement savings, but we're living longer. We're healthier on average. We're definitely better educated. And so there's a lot of opportunity to keep earning an income because so many people, they reach that age 50, 55, and they look at, I have no retirement savings, or I have very little retirement savings. What am I going to do? I'm supposed to be retiring. Well, you're probably not going to retire. You're going to continue working, and you need that paycheck, but you also want that paycheck because in the workplace, it's a community. It's an income. You're using your skills, and we all at our core want to be useful. So I think it's an optimistic picture that I paint in terms of what are the options available to us. I'm at the age where, as you can see, I have white hair, and young college graduates come and they'll say, I know what a job is, but what is this career thing? And these are wonderful conversations. And they want to be financially independent, but they want to do something that really matters, that makes a difference, that they're proud about. And these are wonderful conversations. You should support them. When I have the same conversation with a 60-something, financially independent, make money, but do something that makes a difference. The only difference between the 20-something and the 60-something is to a 20-something, time's infinite, and to a 60-something, time feels shorter.
This really is your purpose. You've been in this field now for several years. So what attracted you to this? How did you first get started in this?
So there's like three aspects to it. So in my career, there have been sort of two strands. So one is personal finance and one is economics. So if you're doing personal finance for the past 25 years, the story has been saving for retirement. Have you saved enough for retirement? You haven't saved enough for retirement, and your standard of living is going to fall when you reach those retirement years. When you look at the economics, it's about the demographics of an aging population. And we're just going to have an economy that's less vibrant, it's less creative, it's less productive, because we're going to have too many of these dependent elderly supported by too few young people. And I rebelled against this. There's something wrong over here. And then the third strand was this notion that you reach some arbitrary age 60, and all of a sudden you're frail. You're no longer useful. Why don't you fade into the sunset? We hope you have some fun. But you no longer have anything to contribute to our economy, to our society, to the workplace, to starting new businesses. And then you just start doing some research and you start asking questions and you find out that all those stereotypes are completely wrong. And so that was the driving motivation behind it, that with an aging population, we should be optimistic, that we could be more creative, we can be more productive, we're going to have more small businesses and more startups. And that, by the way, if you're creative in your 20s, you're creative in your 60s, in your 70s, and your 80s.
Now, in the book, you say that in just a decade, more than 21% of the U.S. population, so that's 73 million people, that's a pretty big chunk, right?
Yes.
Is going to be past traditional retirement age. So how does this impact our economy in the marketplace?
So the way that it impacts our economy and marketplace, if you think about the 50 plus control most of the income and most of the wealth in this country. So in one sense, they have a lot of money to spend. So if you look at where our economy is going to be going and what's going to be driving it on the consumer side, it is going to be the 50 plus population. Is extremely important. But in terms of the economy, to give you another number, so around a quarter, more than a quarter now, of all new businesses are started by the 55 to 64-year-old age group. And that's up from about 14, 15% in 1996, 1997. And these are new businesses. A lot of them are self-employment, solopreneurs, but maybe some are small, but some of them are bigger. And so people are creating companies. The labor force participation rate, has been rising for the 60 plus, 65 plus, 70 plus since the early 1990s. And that continues to grow. So again, the reason that it's important to emphasize that as people get older, they can be really creative. They've learned how to connect the dots. It's wisdom. There's judgment at work. The same thing is true at work. And so we have these stereotypes that are blocking people from exercising their creativity and being productive. And the only thing that's sort of changing people's minds right now is this relatively tight labor market and people saying, well, I can't find people. So rather than push people out the door, maybe we want to keep them around for a little longer. And then hopefully that everyone starts to realize that because we're better educated, because we're healthier, as you age, you still have a lot to offer this economy.
And I know there's a lot of people who have reached out to me on Facebook, not just on your appearance tonight, but even over the past year of looking at jobs and jobs for those past 50. I've had both men and women just say it is so tough.
It is tough
for them. And even if their skills are up to date, it's still tough.
It's still tough. Ageism is real. I mean, ageism is just out there. It's real. So let's just, that is just a fact of life right now. And hopefully I was at this conference, Aging in America conference in New Orleans, and one speaker said something that really struck me was his goal was, and his hope was, that just as the younger generation right now, someone who's in their 20s in a workplace, has no this notion of smoking in the office. That doesn't even register at all. But if for someone who's in their 60s, yeah, you remember that. He was hoping that when it comes to ageism in another 20 years, that'll be the exact same thing, that people will not even recognize it. But we got a long way to go. So, but there are things you can do because the labor force participation rate is going up. One, your most valuable asset is your network. You may not use that word network, it's a fancy term that's out there, but it's the people you've known over the years. And very few people are going to get their jobs. In fact, very few people in general get their jobs through the human resources department, through the algorithms, by sending your resume online. So it's tapping into your network, it's talking to your network, and often it's separating out what is your job and your job title from your skill. And your network can help you figure out what is it I'm good at. And then here's the thing. You're going to get your job through your network because they know who you are. They know what you can do. They know your character. And they will say to somebody, second, third, fifth degree of separation, you should talk to this person because they can do the job.
Because you are able to reach out across the country for all of your articles, is that what you're hearing? Is that just the regular thing across the country?
Yes, it is. Very much so. I mean, in terms of across the country, I would say that everything we're talking about is a grassroots movement. And there's a lot of activity on the grassroots level. This conversation isn't really happening much in Washington, D.C. It's not really happening on the state level, in the state capitals. But in metropolitan areas, there's more and more organizations that are being created trying to recognize the creativity of people as they age, trying to, do some matchmaking services. And so it is a dialogue that's going on, but it is absolutely consistent that the way most people are going to get a job is through a network. It's through a recommendation. It's through somebody who knows who they are and will say, you should talk to this company.
So I've been to both SCORE meetings and to Women Venture.
Yeah.
And so I would say in the SCORE meetings I've been to, again, these are to help start
These are
businesses.
retired executives, yeah.
Exactly, but to help people starting a business.
Yeah.
And so is Women Venture. And I would say with SCORE, 50% of the women that I saw in there were over the age of 50. And with Women Venture, a third of the class that I'm going through, I've got a cohort that I'm working with right now, so a third of us are over the age of 50. And to me, that gives me hope because then that backs up everything that you're seeing and talking about at Next Avenue.
So two things really quickly. One is, with time, you know how to solve problems, right? And if you think about what is a business says, I can solve your problem. Or a social enterprise says, I have some skill, I have some knowledge about how to address this issue. So the thing is, people are drawing on their skills and their networks and their contacts, and they know how to create a business. And so it's not that surprising. It's just that we don't think about it that way, that it's happening. The other thing is, I really wish everywhere you travel, you probably have run across this, there are these entrepreneurial ecosystems that grow up, right? The co-sharing workspaces, the incubators, the accelerators, and when people, talk about them, it's somebody, wearing a hoodie running through the mountains of Colorado, or,
Right.
And the thing is, when you go to these places, look around, and it's multi-generational. And one of the things that I really feel is the entrepreneurial ecosystems should be welcoming the entrepreneurs who are 50 and over, welcoming the entrepreneurs who are 60 and over, rather than thinking that this is an odd thing, which, by the way, if they turn around and look around the very places that they're at, that's who's there.
So in your book, I love the fact that you have 5 suggestions for older Americans who are working towards purpose and a paycheck. And number 1, you say, ask your employer about alternatives to full-time employment. How does that work? And are there a lot of employers that even offer that?
So formal programs, the last number I saw as far as a formal program, a sort of a phased retirement, or which you can retire over several years and you reduce your hours of work, or what are called boomerang programs, which I think are really wonderful, which is you retire, but then you can come back and you work sort of part-time. You can't work more than 1,000 hours, but you come back. It's only like about 14% of companies have formal programs. There's a lot of informal programs, and right now with this tight labor market, there's a lot more informal programs. But the basic idea is, if you're thinking about leaving your employer, but you'd like to maintain some sort of contact, talk to them, and when someone goes on vacation, when maybe there's a season when things are really busy. If you look at UPS, for example, and UPS has done this thing that I find absolutely fascinating. I can't remember what they used to call it, the retiree group. That's not quite right, but it was something like that. And they changed it into, it's the alumni. And the warehouse workers, the truckers, they all come back during the holiday season because there's just so many packages. And the thing about it, it's a win-win, right? Because UPS doesn't have to spend much money training. They know what they can do. The workers are coming back. They're going to make some decent money, see some of their friends, a little bit of community, and then they go back to do whatever else they're doing. So see if you can negotiate a deal with your employer, and in this market, I think you have some leverage.
University of Minnesota has an interesting program. I think it's a 1-year program, and you get a certificate at the end of it, and it's escaping me at the moment.
Advanced Career Initiative,
yes, okay.
Which is wonderful.
So people have sent me a couple of reminders on LinkedIn. You should talk to these people. Okay.
Yeah.
But you say take lifelong learning seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, the notion that, if you think about younger people today graduating from college, and you look at life expectancy, they may be talking about 60, 70-year careers. And the notion that at the age 24, 25, 28 maybe, that's going to hold you for the rest of your life. So you're always going to be learning something. And one of the things about being at work is that you are always learning something. But I think you need to build into your sort of mental processes that maintain your education, maintain your skills, because the world changes. We know it changes fast. And age has nothing to do with whether or not you are competent to do anything. Age is just a number. But to maintain your skills and keep your skills up to date, I think it's really important. So you may not want to go back for 4 more years to an undergraduate education again in your 50s or 60s, but to go back and get a certificate, to master some sort of skill that adds to your desirability to an employer, or more importantly, you want to do something and you need that skill. So I think you just build it into your mental budget and also into your financial budget.
And that's what I did with my master's when I got my master's. But I will say I was typically the oldest one in class, but that's okay. Yeah. But some of my teachers were even older, so we're all good.
Yeah. And the thing is, I imagine that the younger students benefited from it, and you benefited from those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It was a two-way conversation. Every
Yeah.
time I was in there, it was fabulous. You also say start a side gig. So is that easy for those 50 plus to do that?
Sure, most of us have some sort of passion, we have some sort of interest, and we usually talk about this with younger people in their 20s, they always have some sort of side gig. But look, the proverbial garage is a wonderful place to sort of be doing something in the office. And because as you get older, one of the things to think about is, do you want to start a business? And I think in the heart of everybody, we're Americans. We have this desire to start a business. Doesn't mean that we're going to. Most people don't. But it is always something in the back of your mind. So I think a side gig does two things for you. One, unfortunately, we're in an economy where people lose jobs. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So a side gig can help you get through those tough periods. Two, a side gig can turn into self-employment or a small business, a solopreneur. So, 15 years ago when I started, thinking about this, or 10 years ago, I would have said, starting your own business, that's too risky. You can't do that. Or don't touch your 401k. By the way, don't touch your 401k. Mm-hmm. But most small businesses that are being started, it's not taking much money. The office is the home, or maybe a co-sharing workspace, and you're not spending much money. The real expenditure is time. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a passion, you understand the market. You know the customer. That's the most valuable thing that an entrepreneur can have, is knowing the customer.
So start about thinking that would have been good information for me about 15 years ago. But the thing is that a lot of the people that I used to work with at Channel 11, they have moved on. I mean, not all of them, but there are a few, and they have transitioned from what they were doing. And they now work in marketing. They work at small businesses, and they took their reporting skills that they had in creating stories, and everything is about creating a story these days, but they're able to use it now in the new way of sharing stories. So, so start your side gig is a good piece of advice.
And this is that important thing about thinking about what is your skill set as opposed to what is your job title. Mm-hmm. And what they did probably is, transitions always take longer than we want. They're always harder than we'd like them to be or hope them to be. But they took advantage of their skills and make a transition to a different sector of the economy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then you say, do good. I like this one, for others and yourself.
Well, you want to make a difference, and we all want to make a difference. And a friend of mine said the other day, when she got up in the morning and she was in a bad mood, she would think, okay, who can I help today? And may stay in a bad mood, but not necessarily. And I just think giving back is so important, and thinking about the common good. And a lot of people, with age, they end up creating a portfolio of activities. So some's going to bring in some money, hopefully, bring in some money and validates what you're doing. Some may be some volunteer activity, but you no longer want to be told work 40 hours for 50 hours pay. And you kind of want to be doing something that you feel good about and you think does make a difference to people. So I think doing good is good for you, and it's good for our community. So don't put that down on the list. Mm-hmm. Put it high on the list. Mm-hmm.
And I had guests from Serve, Minnesota. So they're not only they doing good, they're getting paid at the same time. So good for them. And then finally you say, go into business with your son or your daughter.
Well, this is, I think, one of the most fascinating trends that's going on. And look, the generations like each other. Boomers like their adult children. And I was interviewing this small business consultant, wonderful man out in the Bay Area, Steve King. And we both shared this story, the notion we loved our fathers. Mm-hmm. But if our father ever walked in the room and said, would you like to go into business with us? We'd run, just out. And it would never even occur to him to have said that. Mm-hmm. If our children said, would you go into business with us? We'd drop exactly everything that we're doing, and we do it that day. Mm-hmm. And so there's this trend. I don't have the numbers. I searched for the numbers, but you don't have to look very far to see examples of boomers going into business with their millennial and Gen X children. And typically what the boomer is bringing is some experience and some capital, some money. And then what the young person is bringing, that hustle and some tech savvy. And in the end, as the older parent starts fading in working less, they're going to inherit the business. Mm-hmm. So it's really a win-win situation, and I know there can always, people like that, there could be issues and all that kind of stuff. But fact of the matter is, it's fun. And I think it's one of the most heartening trends in our economy. And you're seeing it in so many parts, particularly in sort of the artisan side, the craft side of our economy. And so I just think this is a wonderful trend. And if it's something that a good idea comes along, why not?
I think, I don't know if they're making any money, but I've seen definitely a father-son on Twitch doing gaming. And so they talk about the games they each like, and then they sometimes play each other on, but it's a thing for them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of amazing.
And I interviewed in the book, I have a father who had retired, looking for something to do. He'd been a teacher in upstate New York, and his son was working it was an environmentalist, but they went on this bike trip, and they both really loved beer. And they created a brewery. And it's in business, it's doing well. The mother has now joined them, she keeps the books, and so it's a family affair, and I think that's just great.
Oh, thank you so much for all of your information tonight. I really appreciate it. And so now I need to let our viewers find your book. So it's Chris Farrell, Purpose and a Paycheck. It has been published by HarperCollins Leadership, and it can be found on Amazon.com.